I always go back to the like how a bill becomes a law sort of. That's
Yeah,
a song that we
sure.
learned when we were kids, right? How's that happen? Where are things in Washington? What's the likelihood that this could pass?
Yeah.
What do things look like?
Yeah. Well, let's talk specifically for
Yeah.
starters about legislation that's designed to constrain the abuses of PBMs.
Yep.
That legislation actually has reasonable prospects of moving forward. And as you say, how does a bill become a law? Well, obviously the two chambers of Congress, but then there are committees within each chamber that have jurisdiction over various aspects of healthcare delivery. Yep. Depending on who's doing the paying. If it's Medicare, it's one committee in the House. If it's Medicaid, it's another committee in the House, although sometimes they share jurisdiction. If it's the commercial markets, it's yet another committee. If it's the VA, it's yet another. And if it's healthcare for active duty military services members, it's yet another, right? And that's part of the problem is it's hard to get consistency across everything. Having said that, the major PBM reform legislation is under consideration in the Senate. From the point of view of long-term care pharmacies, the most important programs are Medicare and Medicaid. There are there's other, but those are the big ones. That's the Senate Finance Committee. In July, the Senate Finance Committee, got a bill through the committee, which means it's ready to go to the floor with a variety of PBM reforms. Today, as a matter of fact, the day we happen to be taping this, there's a hearing on another bill that includes additional protections for pharmacies. And that all looks good for getting to the Senate floor and probably getting enough votes in the Senate to, get it into the process of a, resolution of a bill between the two chambers and getting to the president's desk. In the House, there was a major piece of legislation that was largely around transparency and disclosure that came out of the Energy and Commerce Committee earlier this year.
Because it makes sense that Energy and Commerce governs healthcare. Super logical.
Energy and Commerce, well, it's commerce, right? So it's Medicaid,
commerce. And
some aspects of Medicare. And the other, then there's the Ways and Means Committee, which of course also says screams healthcare, right? But that has some jurisdiction as well. And in addition, there's going to be some more legislation next week that Energy and Commerce will consider. So if you look at the broad politics around PBM reform, I would say the preponderance of the weight right now is in favor of it. Of course, the insurance companies and the PBMs are arguing against it, and they have supporters as well. But if it were simply an up or down vote by both chambers of Congress as to whether to pass PBM reform legislation, it would be passed. That, however, is not how the process works, right? Because you'll get both chambers that will move this legislation, but then it will be included in some bigger package because Congress has difficulty doing things except in these big packages because of the political conflict that makes it hard to get things done, which leads us to the recent fight over the Speaker of the House and Mike Johnson from Louisiana emerging as the current Speaker of the House, because in order to pass legislation, you actually have to have agreement by everybody. And the House Republicans right now, especially the kind of, the MAGA wing of the House Republicans, really don't want to compromise on things like whether to continue funding the government, whether to pass major pieces of legislation, et cetera. So there is some risk that by the end of this year, there won't be a year-end package. And if there isn't a year-end package, the PBM reform legislation will not be done this year. However, it could be done next year, too soon to tell.
Right.
So if these bigger political forces get resolved, then we will see PBM reform legislation this year, I think. I don't, if not